When scholar Harlan Hahn analyzed the experience of disabled persons in Los Angeles, he examined geographic dispersion, the absence of a sense of community, and the impact of pervasive standards of personal appearance. I wanted to focus on the interaction between the individual and the environment, and the way that policies reflect prevalent social attitudes and values. So Hahn's research inspired me to examine another urban area, Montreal. Here I got the chance to speak to a professor and former federal civil servant about transportation, accessibility, and universal design.
Really, I think the problem of universal design lies in education.
The way to debunk this misconception is education. I think the incentive for each of the designer to do is to think in terms of the cost of retrofitting. The second is that they should think outside the box, because when you design something that is accessible, you could actually use it to be a business opportunity. For example, the staircase underneath a terminal, a transport terminal, instead of putting flower boxes to box it up, you could use it as a coffee shop, which generates revenue, and you could prevent the blind person from hitting his head. Thirdly, like I always say, may you live in interesting times. That's a Chinese proverb, meaning that when you break a leg on an icy pavement, then you know the meaning of accessible systems and environments.
Accessibility, I think, is the right of every citizen, of every person, that should be allowed to go and be able to get into and use an object or a service as everyone else. Everyone has to have that right. If you have accessibility, you have social participation, period, from every point of view and for every kind of people.
For me, I'm in accessible transportation. So accessible transportation means that the system, the vehicle, and the environment need to be accessible, and the entire trip chain from door through door is accessible.
There are some modifications in the environment that you do for some people with certain disabilities, that if you do that, then you're endangering other kind of disabilities, and they oppose. The reality is that sometimes it is not possible. But again, the effort of including as many people, well, that is something good.
Now, I must warn against the use of universal design as a panacea to cover all aspects of everything. I mean, it certainly covers very much of the environment and the buildings aspect, but not, like I mentioned before, the trip chain, the movement aspect, the mobility aspect.
Well, the shift, I think, it was fundamental because individuals were looking at really just only from the medical perspective, whereas that's not the individual. The individual, as everyone else, has interactions. So the social component is fundamental.
I agree with the shift in general for the daily living, but I would add that in terms of transportation, we do not use disability as defining the user. what we want to do is look at the limitations.
You know, a citizen is a citizen, so every time that we have an opportunity at every level, we have to show to the rest of the world that this is the place for universal accessibility.
And how does Montreal rank? For instance, not a lot of the metro stations have elevators.
No, of course, but you can say that almost 97% of all the public buildings are accessible in Montreal, but the same thing when we've been building it in 65. Now we are renovate a lot of them, and the new one we are making sure that they are accessible, but every time we'll talk about public transport, we'll have also to address that.
If only 10% of the metro stations are accessible, well then there's a problem, right? Then the city cannot be judged as very accessible. I honestly do not believe that 97% of the buildings are accessible.
The 97% of accessibility quoted by Mayor Carrieres depends on whether what he considers as accessible and to whom. It depends on the user group as well as the type of accessibility.
One of the main problems in accessibility is in the curb cuts of the sidewalks. So we came up with a solution that would melt this snow, and it will be with a metallic surface that will be connected to the hot air of the sewer system, which is basically at 10 degrees. And this will be enough to melt most of the snow and will be next to a drainage system. However, if there is a very crude winter, well then an electric system kicks in, let's say at -5 or -10, so that it will help melting the snow.
Quand je suis déménagé à Montréal il y a un peu plus d'1 an, j'ai été effroyablement déçu un peu de voir le retard qui existe en matière d'accessibilité générale. Il suffit d'une marche en fait dans un commerce, dans un bar pour que moi je puisse pas entrer, je puisse pas y avoir accès. À Montréal, l'accessibilité universelle, c'est loin d'être une chose acquise, tant dans les édifices publics que dans les commerces, que dans les écoles. L'exemple flagrant ou l'exemple typique où l'accessibilité universelle n'existe pas, c'est dans le métro de Montréal, sur les 68 stations de métro. Il y en a à l'heure actuelle 8 qui sont accessibles aux personnes à mobilité réduite. Quand j'ai été à Londres, par exemple, c'est le moment que je me suis senti en fait le plus libre, le plus autonome dans ma vie, c'est de pouvoir me déplacer d'un point A au point B avec une pareille aisance. C'est quelque chose que j'avais jamais ressenti avant. J'ai pu voir que tant à Bruxelles qu'à Lyon, qu'à Londres, qu'à beaucoup d'autres endroits, il faisait beaucoup mieux qu'à Montréal. Fait que j'étais un peu tanné, j'étais un peu frustré de me retrouver si souvent à la porte dans les lieux publics. Devant cette injustice, j'ai fait appel au gars de Portrait de Montréal.
Ce qu'on a fait, c'est qu'on a cherché à rencontrer 68 personnes qui étaient affectées de près ou de loin par le problème d'accessibilité pour les photographier devant les 68 stations de métro du réseau de la STM et qui nous parlent de concrètement, c'est quoi l'impact du manque d'accessibilité à Montréal sur leur vie.
J'essaie d'être présente pour mes 2 filles le plus possible. L'une d'entre elles est en 6e et va présenter sa première pièce de théâtre cette semaine. Mais je ne pourrai pas aller la voir parce que son école n'est pas accessible.
Je ne peux pas voir mon père quand je veux. Pour ma fête, j'étais supposé le voir, mais la personne qui devait venir le chercher n'a pas pu venir. C'était plate de ne pas pouvoir le voir le jour de ma fête.
Quand je me suis cassé le coccyx, ça a changé ma perspective sur les déplacements. Avant, je me demandais comment je peux aller à telle place. Et quand je guérissais, c'était est-ce que je peux me rendre à telle place.
Tous les matins, c'est un défi pour accéder au métro. Les gens te voient avec la poussette, ils savent, mais soit ils regardent ailleurs, soit ils se dépêchent. Certains sont dans leur bulle et n'ont pas du tout conscience que ça peut être un problème pour d'autres.
Le résultat, c'est 68 photos et 68 histoires. Et on a besoin de votre aide pour mettre sur pied cette exposition.
Well, the Montreal this sort of problem with accessibility is not unique. It happens to the rest of the world, the other cities in Canada, as well as many cities in the States as well. Now, the harsh winter, of course, only means that there are additional barriers to consider. But the primary thing is political will. Whether there's leadership and political will to implement it. Accessibility certainly requires an added dimension in all the things that we do, the things we provide. But a strong legislation like the American for Disabilities Act, coupled with strong enforcement measure, would have made the situation much better.